Snow fell in slow, quiet sheets over the valley, blanketing everything in a pale softness that hid the harshness beneath. She sat alone at the edge of the clearing, her long, dark hair falling over her shoulders like a storm cloud against white frost. The feathered headband she wore fluttered lightly with every cold breath of wind. Her fringed dress, thin, worn, and far from warm enough, clung to her small frame, and though she kept her arms crossed over her chest, she trembled violently. She had been walking for days. No tribe behind her, no home to return to. Only memories she did not want, and dangers she could no longer outrun. Behind her, at the far end of the snowy yard, stood a weathered wooden building, a cabin shaped by years of storms and lonely nights. Leaning on the porch railing was a figure, half hidden by the drifting snow. He wore a heavy coat, the kind built for someone who'd seen many winters and buried more trouble than he cared to recall. He did not move. He simply watched. He had seen her collapse earlier, but waited, unsure if she was a trick of the storm or a wandering spirit trying to disappear. The woman lifted her head slightly, glancing over her shoulder toward the cabin. A red arrow, painted on a wooden post stuck into the snow, pointed toward that very building. She had been following that arrow, placed by someone she prayed still had a heart. She wasn't sure if stepping toward that porch would save her, or get her turned away again. Her breath came out in broken white clouds. Hours ago, she had promised herself she wouldn't cry, not anymore. But the cold was biting through her bones, and exhaustion dug into her soul like claws. She needed warmth, food, maybe a fire, anything. The man on the porch finally stepped forward. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he descended the steps, his silhouette becoming clearer with each step. A tall, rugged man with years carved into his face and wisdom into his eyes. He approached slowly, stopping several feet from her. "You're far from anywhere," he said, his voice carrying the rasp of old loneliness. "Who are you running from?" She didn't answer. Her lips were too numb, her trust too damaged, and her story too painful to speak. Instead, she closed her eyes, swayed, and collapsed sideways into the snow. The man instinctively lunged forward and caught her before her head hit the ground. She weighed almost nothing. "Easy," he murmured. "I've got you." For the first time in days, she felt warmth. His coat, his hands, his steadiness. She wanted to lean into it, but she also feared it. As her vision blurred, she whispered a single word, barely a breath, barely a plea. "Please." And the world went dark. She awoke to the crackle of firewood and the soft glow of lantern light. The warmth wrapped around her like a blanket she'd long forgotten the feeling of. She blinked slowly, her lashes crusted with melted snow and tears. For a moment she panicked, sitting up too fast, clutching the blanket around her. "You're safe." The voice came from a man sitting in a wooden chair nearby, the same one who had caught her in the snow. He didn't stare at her the way others had. There was no suspicion, no disgust, no hunger, just an odd mixture of concern and distance, as if he wasn't sure he deserved to help anyone anymore. "You were frozen stiff," he continued. "Lucky I spotted you before the wolves did." She looked down, realizing he had wrapped her in a thick wool blanket and propped her near the fire. Her boots steamed beside the hearth. Her dress hung on a line, drying slowly. Someone, likely him, had given her an oversized shirt to wear. Her breath trembled. Kindness wasn't something she recognized easily. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. Names held meaning, history, pain. But hiding it had done nothing for her. "Tallulah," she whispered. He nodded. "I'm Harris." A silence stretched. He stirred the fire with a poker, flames sparking upward. You got somewhere to return to? He asked gently. Her eyes filled instantly, and she shook her head. He didn't press. He didn't need to. Instead, he stood, poured a bowl of hot stew from a pot hanging over the fire, and handed it to her. She took it with both hands, starving enough to tremble. Eat slow, he warned softly. She tried, but hunger won and tears slipped down her face. Harris looked away, giving her the dignity of privacy. The next hour passed in quiet warmth. She was grateful beyond words, but fear still clung to her. People had used her before, hurt her deeply. When she finally worked up the courage to speak, her voice cracked. Why did you help me? Harris shrugged. Because someone once saved me when I didn't think I was worth saving. She studied him closely, the softened sadness in his eyes, the loneliness stitched into his posture. He was a man haunted by ghosts of his own. Outside, the wind howled. Snow piled higher against the cabin walls. Inside, for the first time in a long time, Tallulah felt alive. And Harris, for the first time in years, felt something stir in his chest. A quiet sense that maybe fate had brought this girl to his porch for a reason. Neither knew how much their lives were about to change. The storm raged for 2 days, trapping them together in the small cabin. At first they barely spoke, each trapped in their own silence. But the fire's glow softened the edges of their loneliness, and slowly a fragile connection began to form. He showed her how to warm her hands properly, how to wear the extra coat he'd given her, how to move closer to the fire without getting burned. She watched him chop wood outside the window, each swing of his axe carving through more than frozen logs, carving through the invisible wall around his heart. Tallulah found herself studying him. Harris was older, but strong, rough around the edges, but with a gentleness rare in men she'd known. He spoke softly, asked nothing in return, and never once looked at her like she was a burden. By the third evening, she finally told him the truth. Her tribe was gone, raided, burned. She had fled only because her mother had pushed her out of the lodge, whispering, "Live," even as flames swallowed everything behind her. Tallulah had walked through snow for 3 days without food, expecting death to finally take her. Harris listened quietly, jaw tightening with emotion he didn't show often. "You don't deserve any of that," he said. His voice shook just enough for her to notice. "And I don't deserve to be here," she murmured, lowering her head. He stepped closer. "Tallulah, you deserve shelter, you deserve safety, and you deserve to heal." Her eyes lifted. "But why would you care?" He hesitated, then gave the first honest answer he'd given anyone in years. "Because I've been alone a very long time. And because when I saw you in the snow, I realized I didn't want to lose someone else." A heat spread through her chest, fear mixed with something softer. When the storm finally broke the next morning, sunlight glistened over the snow like a field of diamonds. Tallulah stepped outside, breathing deeply, her cheeks flushed pink with cold and new hope. She turned back toward the cabin, where Harris stood at the door. The red arrow still pointed toward his home, but she no longer needed a sign to guide her. She walked back to him on her own. He held the door open, the faintest smile touching his lips. "You can stay as long as you want," he said. Tallulah stepped inside. For the first time since her world burned, she felt like she belonged somewhere. And Harris, after years of silence and snow, felt the warmth of being needed again. A new life had begun for both of them. In the quiet, snow-covered valley, 2 lonely souls finally found home.